All right. Phew. Boy, I'm going to keep admitting all, and I think I can turn off the waiting room. So now, oh, great. Perfect. Wonderful. So now the waiting room is off and we're just letting people come on in and join us and grab their seats. Hey, Liz. Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so excited to see you. I'm going to spotlight Carrie and I'll spotlight myself as well. That may be I may regret that decision. If so, I'll just unspotlight myself, but it's perfect. So it'll give us front and center. And we are live on YouTube and we've got folks coming on in. So generally, Carrie will give a couple minutes for people to come in and get their seats and get connected and warm up the pipes of the internet. Just make sure all those bits and bytes are flowing through. We have Gareth out there keeping an eye on YouTube for us. Wonderful. Hey, Celissa, good to see you guys. Welcome. So we will, in just a couple of moments, we will get started with today's fireside chat that is not quite at the fireside, but we're going to roll with it. We're going to mix things up, keep things interested. We have with us today Carrie Jade Williams, and in just a moment, I'll let her introduce herself and kick us off. Now, Carrie Jade, you said you're in Ireland, right?
I am in Ireland, yeah.
Perfect. Wonderful. So I'm so glad. Thank you for helping us figure out the time differences.
No, I thought that's it. That's the standard now. That's the thing, because the world's gone online. You can do things all over the world, but you sometimes have to figure out, okay, which time zone am I in?
And we just went through that phase where the US had changed the daylight savings thing, and oh my goodness. So I'm glad we got through that. And here we are. So fantastic. Okay. Waiting room is still flowing. That's great. I say we kind of kick it off. So welcome everybody back here at AutoCrit along with Carrie Jade Williams for today's fireside chat. We're so excited to welcome Carrie Jade, and I'm just going to call you Carrie unless you would prefer, unless you feel like you're in trouble, and then I will call you Carrie Jade.
Shall I explain why the Jade got added? So when I submitted my first ever thing out into the world about a year ago, I just put Carrie Williams, and they came back to me and they said, was I aware that a monster from Monsters University is called Carrie Williams? And when you Google that, the first thing that comes up is a pink monster. And did I want to be like a C Williams? Did I want to be something else? And I said, oh, just throw my middle name in there. And it just stuck. So the reason, I've become all official with my full name and say, no, Carrie is fine. It was just because that editor didn't want, the first thing that came up with me being a monster. So there we go.
That is so excellent and such a great way to work in your middle name. So there's no mistaking. We're talking today with the author, Carrie Jade Williams, not the pink monster from Monsters University, who, by the way, would not return our calls. So it's fine.
I'm sorry you're stuck with me instead.
Oh, rats. Well, yeah, now everybody has to go and Google their own names now to see what kind of monster comes up. Yeah. So yes, we very much appreciate it. And, I've mentioned a couple of times, like we're here with author Carrie Jade Williams. Carrie, like, tell us a little bit about yourselves. Generally, we just let our guests give a little bit of background and how they found their way into writing. And I know that your story is particularly personal and just exceptional. So Carrie, if you don't mind, tell us about it.
I don't know if I'd say exceptional. Well, basically, I kind of start. So over a year ago now, I got diagnosed with a terminal degenerative neurological illness called Huntington's. It had destroyed a large portion of my brain at that point, and I was very, very poorly. I was a very poorly girl, and kind of ended up in intensive care. And part of going through that, I had a great neurologist And he said to me, do you know what, write a bucket list and see, use your time as well as you want to use it. It's your decision. So I wrote my bucket list, and on that bucket list was loads of stuff. And one of the things I put on there was, I'm going to write a story. I'm going to write a book. Now, I've never written anything before. My background is not in the arts in any way, shape or form. So I, and also at that point, I had lost the inability to write with a pen. I was kind of, Huntington's is basically Parkinson's meets ALS meets Alzheimer's. So physically, I'd got to that point where, I couldn't really do a great deal of stuff. So I, being very pragmatic, and anyone who sort of knows me a little bit knows I'm a bit stubborn. So I just decided, well, it didn't really matter that I couldn't write anymore. I'd learn how to use assistive technology. And so kind of the starting ground for me was there's amazing assistive technology out there. I use talk to text technology, which is where you talk your words and the computer kind of types it for you. I use memory prompts, and I use like some great technology. And I just started writing, and obviously we then were plunged into a global pandemic. So that meant that all courses, everything suddenly went online. So I'd never written anything, and suddenly had access to some amazing courses and resources, like you guys, and different things online. And I always say, for me as a writer, I threw myself into it because nobody ever told me what the rules were. So I didn't know that you weren't supposed to be pitching articles. I didn't know that you were supposed to, earn a 4-year degree and things. So I had no self-doubt at all. I just pitched to anybody. I'd enter any competition. I'd have a go at anything. And and also I think because I have Huntington's, I don't remember if I get a rejection, I don't remember it the next day. I've memory loss. So for me, I was just having this awesome year of submitting work, and I've been extremely blessed to have met great people and have great resources, and just be having fun. I have so much fun with my writing, and it's opened so many doors for me. And so and that's
it's such a new endeavor. I remember when I talked to you before this interview, you said you didn't even tell your mom you were doing this until you won that Financial Times essay. I mean, that's a big deal.
We'd had photographers out, and my mom, I got on Zoom, and my mom was like, my gosh, the hair's done, love. Who are you trying to impress on Zoom? And I said, I had a photographer out. And she said, why? What's that all about? And I said, I'm in the Financial Times tomorrow. When I'd won their writing competition. Now, even I didn't realise, on the back of winning that competition, I had 9 agent offers. It was phenomenal. I went from I think I had 3 people following me on Instagram to 1,000 people. It was crazy that Saturday. I had people send me chocolate. It was crazy just in the aftermath of.
Wait, what? Nobody told me we could get random send of chocolate if we win a competition. This motivates my writing in a different way. I love that.
Well, it was a Swedish chocolatier and a chocolate shop based in Switzerland reached out, and they had read my piece, and they said they'd like to send me a chocolate. And I was like, oh, you don't have to do that. And they were like, no, we love your piece and we would like to send you some. And we sort of had a conversation. Wow. And so that's that was a big perk.
I love how many of these amazing fortuitous things can happen, when you just put yourself out there. So you mentioned, Carrie, that you didn't know there were rules around etiquette or whatever about submitting. And I feel that sometimes the etiquette can get a little too much. Tell us how you came to submit to the Financial Times for the essay contest, because that's a big, if you never ask, you never get. So
yeah, well, I mean, I'll be completely honest here. I was doing a course, and it was quite a prestigious course. And as a disabled writer, I think that there was kind of this feeling that I had a disability, and I had a lot of baggage, shall we say. And this group, you had to give feedback to each other, and all my feedback that I was getting was about the fact that when you use assistive tech, the words on the page, the margins are slightly bigger than if you don't use assistive technology. Now, my argument is, when I send work in and it gets professionally edited, they rejigged the margins, and nobody really knows. I mean, to edit when you can't type, I'm not going to lie, it's really tough. I always say, imagine sitting on your hands and verbally having to move your words around on the screen. Every time that you want to change a paragraph, that can be a good 10 minutes worth of work. And so I was on that, and all my feedback was about that my margins were off. And I sat there and I had person after person after person, and I said, okay, but what about the words that I've written on the page? Because how it looks on the page doesn't really matter. When anything gets published, it gets, that's what editors do. And they didn't seem to be able to move past the fact that the margins were off onto the words. So I came off, and I sort of thought, do you know what? Nobody knows the process of somebody that uses assistive technology. So I just wrote that essay, and I was a little bit annoyed because, I'd gone on this course and I just felt that the feedback hadn't been of any real value. And I just sort of felt like every time I edit, the way that my work is edited is really removing my disability off the page to make it presentable. So I wrote the essay, and just looked up who was accepting work at that time, hit send. I didn't think I'd ever, and I do commit to getting 100 rejections in the year. That's another thing that I'd actively committed to getting, and that kind of got me into a bit of trouble my first year writing, because I would get acceptances for things, and then I'd go, oh no, you were supposed to reject me. I was trying to get 100 rejections.
Like, sorry, you're really not helping me meet my goal of 100 rejections.
So, like the Irish Writers Centre, they do a program every year for writers, where it's a writers in residency program, and I applied to that and got accepted. At that point, I'd had nothing published, and they were like, but you need a bio, like a writer's bio. We had to I think they put down that I like going for walks in the meadow. They keep trying to make me sound kind of like an artist. So I just rolled with it all. But the Financial Times was really that was the one that sort of changed everything. And I mean, I got the phone call for that, and it was a UK number, and I sort of presumed it was a friend. And I had Stuart from Penguin Random House who was judging it, and he was like, yeah, you've won. And I was like, oh, that's nice, thanks. Like I'd forgotten, obviously, because I have Huntington. He said, you've won, there's a sum of money, and it's the Financial Times. And I think it took about 2 days for it to really sink in. And then he sort of walked me through and said, people are going to read this, because I forget people read your work as well. So
that is such an incredible piece. Anyone watching this, if you haven't, go read her essay, the Financial Times 2020 Essay Prize. The essay is called "When I Edit with Assistive Technology," and it's brilliant. I mean, it's such a great perspective and so well written. I'm sorry you're not meeting your goals of getting that many rejections, but I love that.
Well, no, I did. I got my 100 rejections last year. So,
oh, good. Thank goodness. Well,
no, and I mean, I have to say, like that piece, because because I do live with a disability. That piece really opened up the door for me to go and talk to people about accessibility. And that piece, I will always be so grateful. The Financial Times have been amazing with just having that discussion around accessibility, and and it being more than just disability. It being like, how do we get writers that are underrepresented? How do we get older writers? How do we get working moms? How do we get single parents? How do we hear those voices? Because if we want, if we keep saying, oh, we want to hear authentic stories, and that's what we value, but then the gatekeepers to courses and the gatekeepers to the publishing world don't remove accessibility barriers, and we as readers don't demand the removal of accessibility barriers, we're never going to move forward. And a lot of it's really simple stuff. So yeah, it's been phenomenal in that respect, just to be able to work with different platforms to remove accessibility barriers and kind of make that the expectation. So,
and you mentioned it's not just about the physical access to the technology, or I'm struggling with the words to find it, Carrie.
It's okay.
It's the technology that you can use. And I know you have a stable, like a whole portfolio of tools that you particularly use for your own personal accessibility. But you also mentioned, like, just from a lifestyle perspective or a socioeconomic perspective, it's not about always having a physical hindrance. It's sometimes a social hindrance. So I think Ireland has a fund of money for arts accessibility. Tell us a little bit about what you've discovered about accessibility for funding through.
So on my Instagram is full of funding opportunities. And I I will say to anyone, if you are looking for, people sort of, I'm still kind of studying why there's usually arts funding left on the table. And there's loads of artists and creatives who, a little bit of funding opens up doors. And I don't understand why we're not bringing the two together. I'm still doing a bit of research into that. But no, my Instagram is full of funding opportunities. I send out a weekly email for anyone who's looking for funding opportunities. The big one at the moment that I've been doing a big push on is more around people that want to buy time to write. Ireland, the UK, most of Europe, there would be Canada, there's American funds available. And a lot of the complaints around those funding sort of opportunities are we don't get people apply. And I think it's because people don't know about them. Now, I mean, I'm a tiny fish. We need someone much bigger who sort of takes on that accessibility is about removing all obstacles. I think the arts really matter. I think the arts is where we tell stories. And if we don't exist in the stories that we tell, how do we expect society to view anything differently? I mean, I would say for me, the first thing, I was told I had Huntington's disease. The first thing I was told is do not Google Huntington's disease because it will, like, you'll need picking up off the floor. I did eventually
I was about to say,
yeah, I did. And the first thing I read about my own illness was horrific. Now, it is a horrific illness, but I hope that in the future, when some young woman gets the diagnosis of Huntington's, that the first thing they might see is someone like me that's living life. It's not, this is going to happen, you have no quality of life, and then you die. I think how we present information, and I think that's why stories matter, and that's why we need authentic voices, because we all feed into the pop culture. And if the pop culture says about you, as a woman, once you hit 40, there's no value for you because we only see 22-year-olds coming out of Hollywood. And if if the story is presented in a certain way, we as writers definitely can feed the pop culture with authentic stories, and that changes things. So I just think it's really important to support writers into getting their work out there. Publishers are adamant, they're constantly going on, we want authentic voices, that's the big in thing, the buzzword. And there's loads of writers out there that are amazingly talented writers. A lot of them have imposter syndrome, and a lot of them don't have access to funds. So you deal with those two things head on, and we can have amazing stories coming out in the next few years. So
absolutely. And imposter syndrome is so universal. Yeah. Men, women, children, like it's in the writing world, in the creative world in general, it is so prevalent. That plus feeling blocked, that you don't have access to the tools, the technology, the processes, the funds, the time. Have you had already kind of so many more people just coming out and saying, like, I wish I could do it, but I really never felt accommodated. Thank you for bringing this up. Like, what has what feedback are you seeing from your efforts with the advocacy?
The main thing that I do, so I just threw out on Instagram and said, look, if anyone wants to get together, we'll do 100 rejection club.
Oh, I love this. Yes.
And so we, and I just thought, I might get 2 or 3 people that come along. I mean, we regularly have a lot more than that. And the goal of that is I celebrate rejection. Like if you turn up and you're like, I got 3 rejections, I'm like, that's awesome because you're trying. And I think, I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone that comes, but I think the goal of that group for me is that when you're having that day where you lose, like you're losing belief in your own ability to continue writing, that actually knowing it's kind of that element of truth. Like I will be absolutely dead straight with people. Like I will be like, everything that gets accepted, I'm like, yeah, but that got rejected 76 times. That project got rejected 203 times. That project got rejected however many times. And I think sometimes it is actually the fact that we live in a world where we only see art when it's finished. We don't see the steps it got to get to that position. So I think that having that level of just, I don't sugarcoat it. I'm like, this is the reality. Rejection's part of it. If you need somebody to kind of cheer you on, I will be your best cheerleader. Just come on board. And we share, and I think the other side of it as well, we share resources. I mean, last night we had an agent drop in. It was a free session. I don't charge for anything. We had an agent drop in and people could ask questions. And I know for a fact that there's now 4 or 5 people pitching to her because they suddenly were like, actually, I can do this. So I think sometimes when I look at accessibility, it's about the belief that you can do that. And I think the other side of it is, I know what it's like to sit in the room and have people perceive you as the worst in the room. You know, I would go to a lot of courses and, you know, I do have to disclose that I have a disability because I use closed captions, because I use assistive technology. And unfortunately, a lot of people's perception then is, you know, it's not always the best. That doesn't really bother me personally. I kind of quite stubborn. I'm quite like, okay, I'll prove you wrong. But I know that not everybody is built the same way as me. So yeah, I think as a group, I mean, we're sharing resources. Every time that there's an editor looking for work, I send it out on Instagram. I'm like, you know, if you are looking to pitch your work, and even if I'm like, if people are like, I don't know how to pitch, I'll say, okay, let's do a step by step. This is how you pitch to somebody. You know, it's kind of removing all of those sort of areas that people might be unsure of what to do. So.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea to build confidence by sharing those steps and sharing resources and going through it together, and honestly, kind of neutralizing the sting of those early rejections. Like, absolutely, we're all going to get them. It is much better to come together and talk about kind of, oh my gosh, this is the best rejection letter I've ever gotten, kind of thing.
And rejection's not personal. Like no, I always say, like for some writers that come to us, I'm always a little bit shocked that I'm the first person that sometimes said it's not personal. Like sometimes I have a project, for example, and I know it was picked up because it landed on the right person's desk at the right time, and she was just interested in it. You know, had that not happened, that would have been a rejection, but it's actually an acceptance instead. So I think it's a numbers game. You have to risk sending your work out there, and it will eventually land on the right person's desk at the right time. And you know, I always say to people, like, your identity isn't that you are a writer. Your identity is that you're an awesome human being who happens to write. And I think if you can sort of have that space between the fact that when somebody rejects you, it's not like an attack on you personally. It's just that your work didn't fit that week, and next week it will. So
it's the right fit at the right time. You're exactly spot on, and it's something that it's so easy to forget. But having friends there and having a community where you can come in and say, "Ooh, gosh, I got this rejection," and have other people remind you, like, "Hey, it's all about timing and the right fit at the right time and the right alignment of whatever. Keep going." I love that.
And I think the other thing that I sort of talk a lot about is I don't believe that it's about talent. I think it's about discipline. And I think it's that if you get up, so like I run another group that gets up so from 5 a.m. till 7:30 a.m. UK time, and then 10 a.m. till 12 o'clock. It's you just get on and we write alongside each other. And I always say that you can't edit something that doesn't exist. So, you know, I would always push like AutoCrit as a resource, because that is kind of like having a little editor sat on your desk, but you can't put nothing through these services. So you have to have words on the page. And I think this idea that, like I'm very upfront about the fact I have a brain that not many people would want. If we were going to the supermarket and you saw it there, you wouldn't want to buy it. But with discipline and the fact that I just fell in love with writing, and I do think for me, I'm going to lose the ability to communicate. So I have to get my words out there now, because in a couple of years' time, that won't be a possibility for me. But I'm surrounding myself with people that are going to have these amazing long careers, but they need to sow the seeds now in believing in themselves. And if all I can do is say, hey, come and sit in a Zoom room with me, let's just build in this habit of writing and supporting each other, that's a really awesome legacy. And, that's kind of the blessing that Huntington's has given me, is that I'm limited for time, and I'm going to live life on my terms and have a lot of fun. And I have a lot to say still. So
we're here for every bit of it. This is so wonderful. David just put in the chat, like, you need your own TED Talk. I 100% agree with that. But you already do have a podcast going. Is that right?
I have a couple of podcasts that have been launched lately. I do, yes. I got a few people sort of, because I started sharing my story and doing different bits and pieces. Yes, I got approached by a few different places. One of them is about kind of neuroplasticity. I'm a huge, as I always say, neuroplasticity for writers is super important. I'm just finishing up a neurology course on it, and I actually have an essay coming out in July focused on sort of neurology and creativity, and how there are actually steps that we can take to really help ourselves. And a lot of that is really grounded in this idea of neuroplasticity. I mean, for me, my temporal lobe, I only have 30% of my temporal lobe. So by kind of old standards, writing should be very difficult for me. Now, I was taught to write from a different part of my brain. And then because I talk my stories into being, and I always say to any writers, if you're struggling with writing, be open to assistive technology. Even if you don't have a disability, you can be writing while doing the washing up. You can be doing other things. And for me, I always say my writing is more like method acting, because I talk it. And I do know of quite a few writers that have switched to assistive technology, and I wonder if it's going to be, I wonder if in years to come we'll be sort of saying, oh, those writers that type, they're so out of date, and the technology, it will be people like me will be like the norms,
right?
Whereas now obviously I would be considered a bit of a rarity because I use assistive technology. But there's loads of and I do free training. I do kind of monthly free training on how to use Dragon technology. I saw somebody's put a note here that they wonder if it would improve dialogue. I have 3 editors who now are convinced that assistive tech improves dialogue in a novel. So I like to think that people might switch to using assistive tech. And I think the more that we talk about these resources, the more it benefits more people. So podcasts are coming out. Again, I put these up on Instagram for when they get launched. I've got a few fun ones coming out as well that I had a lot of fun recording. I think I'd sort of, because I developed, for the last year, I've been doing a lot of talk about accessibility. The first one that I tested with about 100 people, the feedback was, they were like, oh my gosh, Carrie, you're really funny. Whereas I'd obviously developed this series of very serious, so isn't really me. So.
Yes, in our earlier conversation, it makes me think of our earlier conversation before this interview, where you're kind of in the naughty corner in some of your writer groups because you're not quite in their little mold. Girl, you're hilarious.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I sort of
sweary things. Yes.
Well, I sort of say, there's lots of writers, I think, who kind of want to join me in the naughty corner. And I think that there's room for everybody at the table. And I will only write as long as I have fun. And I think that writing should be fun. And I think that people can tell there's lots of writers out there that talk about, oh, it's so difficult and I have to force myself. And I always say writing's a privilege. We generally sit in lovely houses with, running water and food and heat and everything. Writing's a privilege. And if you're not enjoying it, maybe go do something else, like take a break and then come back to it, because you should, like I always say, you should be I'm my number one fan of my work. And if anyone else likes it, that's great. But if they don't, I'm like, well, I'm still its fan. And I think that takes a lot of the burden off me, because, I love it, and kind of who cares if nobody else does? There's lots of different things out there. And definitely now I'd have, lots of writers that, they sort of, I think we've bought into this idea of kind of romanticized writing as a struggle. And I wonder if we challenge that idea and it frees writers up and they actually are having a lot more fun, what that does to their writing process.
Absolutely. I mean, the idea of being your own work's biggest fan absolutely resonates with me. Always be that for your own work, because there will be, rejection letters or low number of star reviews, but that's okay, because we all can't please everybody, but we can always please ourselves and be creative and embrace the vision that we're looking to take into the world. So I love that. We've had a few requests, and I want to make sure we get this. What is your Instagram handle, Twitter handle? Where can we find you and follow you on social medias?
So Twitter is non-accessible. I talk about this a lot. Twitter has a huge number of accessibility barriers built in. I cannot use Twitter with my assistive technology. I email Twitter every Thursday, and I will do it till the day I die. But when you are not on the platform, it's very clever how they've done it, because people who are not on the platform cannot advocate to join the platform. When President Trump got kicked off Twitter, I did a lot at the time of saying, well, hang on a second. He was allowed to join and then I guess misbehave and got kicked off. People like me don't get to join. Am I supposedly worse than that?
Right.
I hope not.
Right.
So I do quite a lot of, I'm quite outspoken about that. But again, it's a huge platform. They have no interest in removing accessibility barriers at the present time. Their claim is that they're going to do their own assistive technology that people will use. Instagram is accessible. So my handle there is at Carrie Jade Writes. But yeah, drop in and say hi.
Yep,
CarrieJadewrites.
All one word, no hyphens, no dashes, no dots, just Carrie Jade Writes. Nice flow. We love that. So we'll definitely put that in our comments and on YouTube as well, just to make sure that anybody watching this on replay, you don't have to write that down. We'll have it in the chat or in the comments, and we'll do that in our replay of this as well, to make sure that everybody can follow Carrie Jade Williams, Carrie Jade Writes on Instagram. If you have questions, by the way, for Carrie, pop them into the chat. We've got eyes on you out there in YouTube land. We've got some folks have joined us here in the Zoom meeting itself. So let's talk a little bit about kind of what all else you write. We've talked a lot about your initial coming out essay of your big breakthrough onto the scene with the Financial Times Essay Prize, but you've submitted also to the London Independent Story Prize. I know you have tons of work. You've said already, you have a lot to share. What other forms, are you using? Books, plays?
So I've got 2 novels going through kind of submission at the moment.
Wow.
And they were written last year in lockdown. Obviously, I've only ever written in lockdown. I've sold to date, I've sold over 100 personal essays that are sort of coming out over the next few months. I have a couple of essay collections coming out. I have a couple of screenplays that are sort of going through that process at the moment. For me, I haven't found one genre that I sort of stick to. For me, an idea comes and I sort of obsess about it, and I don't put too much. For me, I don't sort of, if I love it and I think it has something important to say, I just kind of commit to it. And you have to think, I'm writing with severe memory loss as well. So for me, I have to plan everything out. So when I have an idea, it kind of presents itself in one form. And then I put the time into planning that whole project out, how it will look. And I don't really know. People sometimes say, like, where did these characters or voices come from? I don't know. They just sort of appear, and an idea will appear, and then I plan it all out, and then I just work. I always work backwards, which is a Huntington's thing, I think. I think because with Huntington's, I'm always craving like an answer. If you think, because I live life, and I forget things, and I sometimes can get confused. I think having that concrete, this is definite, kind of matters a lot to me. So I always write backwards. I'm never that interested in like the opening of a book. To be honest with you. So like the first chapter, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, you have to do that. I sort of wish you could open books with them. And I did mention this to someone. I said, I think there could be like this fashion of books being like, chapter 1, Google XYZ, and then just read chapter 2 onwards. Apparently that isn't ever gonna take off, but I did suggest that as an idea. So I always work backwards, and I commit to sort of getting that first draft down in like 60, 70 days. I just work solidly on it. I always write early in the morning, and I do the morning pages every morning, Julia Cameron's morning pages, to sort of clear the brain. And I try to get 2 ideas, either a personal essay or short story, out of that. I'm always trying to get my rejections, so I like to send work out there. I have a few things on my bucket list that I want to get done. Like, I'm desperate to get an op-ed. Like I have regularly, I'm sending out op-ed pieces to sort of the big publications. That's on the bucket list. And who knows that I'm working on a project at the moment that's about finding funding opportunities, and we're running a competition. And Susanna Callahan, who wrote Brain on Fire, I did a presentation where I said, like, her book, when I was relearning basic skills when I was in hospital, that book, I used to just listen to that book all the time, because I was like, even though it's a very different situation, her story gives like neuro patients some kind of hope, because it's like she got out of there and doing well. She then through Instagram, there was kind of quite a few people linking her on Instagram to me, and she's going to judge our final pieces. So I've got to, I cried when I got a DM from Susanna Callahan. I was like, oh my gosh. And she was like, I've read your piece in the Financial Times. So that was amazing. So that's kind of a blog that's happening. I've got a few sort of more experimental pieces that I'm trying to find a home for at the moment. A couple of collaboration pieces. So I've got whatever interests me, I just have a go at all of them. I sort of think, and I mean, some, like flash fiction is the one that I probably struggle with the most, or like micro fiction. And I think that's because I just have too much to say. But like the thought of like being limited sort of freaks me out a little bit, but I'm trying really hard, and I have I'm on a regular course with Jude Higgins, who's amazing. I do a class that's just about writing for well-being with Marianne Power, who is amazing. There's lots of, I've done just loads of courses. I did Write Club with Alison Powell. Wow. She's amazing. So I've had loads of people that have really sort of shared their skills with me, and then I just sort of roll with different projects and see what comes out at the end of it. So I'm not so very amazing. Yeah, there's no sort of I'd love to be, you speak to some writers and they're like, I'm a novelist, and I'm like, I'm a storyteller. I don't know what I do. I just write random things. Brilliant. So
yes. I mean, the idea, and that I think is such a difference. If you just consider yourself a storyteller, then the format, the medium, the whatever is irrelevant, right? I only write long form, epic fantasy, blah, great. But at the end of the day, we're all storytellers, and really embracing that can kind of remove some of that constricted feeling, like, oh, I only write, no, I write all the things and let's see what happens. And I write all the genre, all formats, all links. Oh, I love that perspective of just
the only genre I've been told to never write is romance. I submitted it to someone whose opinion I really value, and she contacted me and said, Carrie, please don't ever write romance. She's like, it reads slightly like horror. And I said, well, maybe I need to, like, you could send me out on some dates, you know, with like some really, like Bradley Cooper. He could, I wouldn't mind that. And they decided that was a no-go, that it was easier for me just to not write romance.
Well, that's disappointing. I love your commitment to the research. And if you need a research assistant in that, I am available. Like, our chat's just probably blowing up right now. Like, yes, sign me up for that.
I listed a few. There were a few men that I sort of said, you know, we could train me up. You know, he could take me out for dinner, and they just decided that. And on the back of that, I did another presentation where I mentioned Post Malone, and there were a few people that didn't know who that was. So they were sort of Googling, and they were like, "Oh, Carrie, really?
Okay. Oh, honey,
Carrie, really? Yeah." So then I was advised to switch to Bradley Cooper. The decision was to just not write romance.
I feel like this, for anyone watching, I feel like we have really come to the nugget of why Carrie will not write romance, and it's all about Post Malone, and I get that. Channing Tatum, Bradley Cooper, these are the acceptable ones. Post Malone is not necessarily your like Hallmark heart-pounding.
Oh, I think he's lovely. And also my mother would really not like that. So it just would make a brilliant personal essay. But
Again, I'm here for all your research techniques, because you're so dedicated to the craft, even though Post Malone, if you're out there, hit us up, Beth@AutoCrit.com. I will connect you with Carrie Jade Williams. We're going to do some research. It's all in the name of science and art and science. Look, if we get a bunch of requests, then I don't know what I'm going to do with that. Let's move. This is how it begins, Carrie. You know, this is how it begins. You talked a little bit about the tools that you use, and especially around the memory prompts and the planning. You mentioned Dragon for the talk to text, which I love. It's come a million miles since last time I used it 100 years ago. But what other tools do you use in particular around like your planning, your memory prompts, and if these are great, would these be good suggestions for other people who want to try leveraging that assisted technology with their writing? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I have very specialist programs that have been I'm quite a good coder. So I coded a lot of my own, I would get to the point where I get frustrated. So I code my own. I have, I'm actually launching my own app, which is going to have a little bit of assistive tech included in it. And I mean, I always say to people, when if you're struggling with planning, do reach out and have a chat with me, because there's loads of resources out there. I mean, Dragon is the big talk to text one. I've got loads of blogs out there. I can send people the links if they want sort of personal recommendations of different things. The first question I always ask people with assistive tech is not what are you struggling with, but when would you like to write? Like, when are the times in your life that you actually get the best ideas? Because the amount of people that say, when I'm out walking my dog, I get these great ideas. And I would say, okay, well then just use the voice recorder on your phone and record yourself talking on it. If you find that you get the best quality ideas when you are moving, well then just upgrade all your technology so that you can write while you're moving. Have it set up so that, if you get that idea when you're in the middle of your living room, I don't know, dusting, so that you don't have to stop what you're doing and sit down and write. Sometimes it is that there's sort of this neurology behind it that our brains associate, okay, I'm now writing, and it paralyzes our thoughts. You know, a lot of the time I tend to take a very different approach when I'm talking about accessibility tools with people as to like, what works for you. And I think sometimes we have been trained that technology exists, like technology came into our homes in a set way, whereas now we need to move into the time that actually for creatives, how can technology work for us? And I think it's those are different conversations we have. I have loads of blog posts. I have a blog post with Writers HQ that details every assistive tech nearly on the planet. And I even go down to like what pens have come such a huge way, but yet we still use these like straight pens. And that there's pens out there that can do a huge comfort to people's hands. How you know, that a weight bear on somebody's wrist can really has, and it's been proven in studies, and I can send on studies if people. I'm a bit geeky. I love a good study. You know, wearing a weight bear on your wrist, how that can, because it takes the pressure and puts sensation on your wrist. For some people, that increases their productivity. For other, you know, I go through on Writers HQ, they have a blog post going up just covering nearly, I think, every accessibility tool kind of on the planet. And also I put on there, if you are looking at investing in some sort of accessibility tool or gadget, I also list on there either who to talk to, how to have a free trial, or ways to make it more affordable, because I think lots of people kind of throw a lot of money at it, and sometimes it's not the best fit. And I'm very, you know, I say it as it is.
No, this is why we love you, though. Seriously, to be such an advocate, not just for people who may have a hindrance, to remove that, but to make things easier, using everything that you've learned around accessibility and the tools and technology that are out there that can help everybody and make everybody.
Sorry to interrupt.
Better.
Accessibility should be about making the world more improved and better for humans. It's not about just, okay, let's put a ramp in here and let's do that. It's about actually, we create buildings that don't work for humans. You know, and actually when you turn accessibility on its head and say, okay, let's make these resources better for humans, that then means that we stop looking at like the disabled community and the able-bodied community, because there's always crossovers. You know, I live with severe memory loss, but there's great positives for that in some respects. I mean, like I don't really, like, negativity doesn't really hit me. It bounces straight off me. Now, there are people out in the world that would love that. You know, that their big thing is I have to process my, you know, my reluctance to do things. Whereas, you know, I'm the other way. I'm sort of throwing myself into everything because I've lost that ability to sort of process criticism, I suppose. And, you know, and I think it's about when we pull together, and particularly as writers, when one writer does well, we all do well. We aren't in competition with each other. We're in competition with ourselves, making our own work better. And I think that is at the heart of it all, is that we need to be in community with each other and realize that, you know, we can all be part of that community, and we all have something important to say, and that, you know, accessibility is part of that. But there's always going to be more. You know, how do we, you know, when we're on writing courses, we should look around, and every single person should be represented on those courses. And if you're, you know, if we're on a course and there's not, you know, people that are retired, if there aren't people from, you know, underrepresented groups, if there aren't, you know, people with disabilities on those groups, we need to be looking at kind of why are those groups not feeling welcome in certain spaces. And then we just kind of create a better environment for everybody. You know, it's I sort of think it's about less of kind of making things better for like just the disabled community or underrepresented writers. It's about when we make an improvement, everybody benefits. You know, I always say the big one is if everybody just used transcripts as the norm, when we do Zoom meetings, nobody would have to take notes because there'd be a transcript available at the end. Transcripts have also been proven to make people, they're kinder to each other because they know at the end there's going to be a record of what's said. So it breeds this idea of actually I'm going to be kind to my fellow human, which is always a good thing in this day and age. And then those transcripts are downloadable. So then people who can't hear, or people like me that need a memory prompt, it's just the norm to have a transcript. That improves everybody's well-being and sort of accessibility. So yeah, to me, it's very logical, but kind of I talk to lots of platforms, and accessibility is not high on their list. So
wow.
Yeah.
I love the idea of turning accessibility on its head, because it starting from getting away from something and improving things for a specific set of people doesn't give you the room to really make those huge strides, right? It's such a great way to look at this. I just really enjoy that.
I'm slightly obsessed with Elon Musk because he's designing the Neuralink project. And, if you have a neurological illness, we're all sort of kind of on tenterhooks with the Neuralink project. And I always think if he gets us to Mars, he's not going to take our planning of how we plan sort of communities. I don't think he's going to build buildings like we build them here with, where there's steps everywhere, and there'll probably be ramps as standard. So I always think that, there is hope, and we can do things on Earth, but I always kind of think, maybe we just all need to move to Mars, and Elon will remove all the accessibility barriers, and, that'll, change things. So I do sort of have quite a good sense of humor about
I'm ready. Mars it is.
If I ever have a day because there are some things that there are crazy accessibility barriers. I can't submit work as a writer to lots of platforms because of accessibility barriers. And I always just go, when they get me to Mars, this won't be the case.
That is wonderful. It's so much easier to start from a place of full accessibility from everybody, or for everyone, for all humans, and build with that as the fundamental guiding principle, rather than current Earth that was like, gosh, it's such a different perspective, and I love that so much. Just giving a quick check to, we've got about 7 minutes left in our regularly scheduled time. I think we're mostly caught up with the questions. Definitely want to get some links, Carrie, from you around, where can we find your podcasts that are coming up, and where can we find some of the great articles that are already out there? Or if on your bucket list, you would, if one of your bucket list items is to write a blog post for AutoCrit.com, we're happy to host that as well. I'm all about that. What can AutoCrit do to help? What can AutoCrit do to help make some of your bucket list items come to fruition? Although honestly, it sounds like you might not need our help with anything.
Oh no, for me, people always sort of talk. I think when we talk about kind of life-limiting illnesses and things, for me, anything could happen at any time, and I say yes to everything. I kind of put myself out there, and you never know when you walk through a door what's going to happen on the other side. And so no, I'll write you a blog post, and we'll put all the links in there and make it all in one place. Because then I think sometimes for writers, so many writers spend hours where to submit, who to submit to, how to submit, and actually if we streamline all that information, it saves writers time. So yeah, I'll do a blog post and put it all in one place, and it's just easier to access the information then. So
and people are so interested in hearing, as always, about the tools that you use in your toolkit around accessibility and what has made life easier. You are still doing the 100 Rejections Club, right?
Yeah, every Monday, so UK time 7 p.m. Monday evenings, and then Thursday evenings 8 p.m. UK time, and then we have loads of different workshops and things. I put it all through Eventbrite. I'll send you on the links for people that want to join.
Yeah.
Everything I put out there is free. I'm very upfront about the fact that any events I do where I have editors or we have a couple of producers and people dropping in, the way that I have negotiated my fees is that I've done work for them and said, don't pay me or pay me less and come and do a free workshop. I'm very upfront about that because I know sometimes people can be a bit suspicious when things are free. That's just a decision that I made, and that's awesome. If we can network as writers, we're better, and that it actually does me. It's good for me, it's good for you, because you'll share resources for me, I'll share resources for you, and we've definitely built a community that is I will not charge for anything. So that's just a decision that we've made to make it accessible, because not everyone can afford fancy courses.
Completely agree. That's wonderful. You've mentioned a couple times, like the environment, especially for authors and especially in this creative space, isn't us against them, isn't me against Carrie. It's not pizza. There's plenty for everybody. Success is not pizza. Write that down. But it's not a finite, like if I give you this slice of pizza, then that's less for me. That's not how this works. So
when
the more you share, the more there is.
Yeah, and say when one book sells well, it means that the publisher's going to buy more work. So I always say that when we invest in each other, ultimately it means that we're investing in an industry that's doing better. I can't read a book anymore because I can't hold one, and my brain doesn't really process reading off the words anymore. So I kind of read a lot through audiobooks. And I love the fact that because of lockdown, audiobooks have suddenly become like hugely, like Audible is like exploding. And I'm like, so just listening to an audiobook, which people love to do, means that there's now more audiobooks available. It's the same with any work really, but I always use the audio sort of analogy. So yeah,
absolutely. That the idea that the more are out there, the more people will buy, the more publishers and Audible, and more opportunities there are to get. Oh wow, what a fantastic! Like it's that flywheel effect, and if you think about it, it's totally logical. But I, for one, had never thought of it that way. I just know, like you just kind of know, there's plenty out there for everybody, but that's the real reason, and that's terrific. We have had such a blast with you today, Carrie. This is so wonderful. I welcome you back with us anytime. I know you mentioned you have an essay coming up on neuroplasticity, I think in July. Yeah. What else is coming? You have so many works in progress. What can you tell us about that's coming up next?
So I'm under quite a few. I'm under a few kind of contracts, so I'm not allowed to sort of announce things. I've got an announcement coming out in 2 weeks, which I'm really proud of. And it's kind of a very different project for me. I have a collection of essays coming out, which is really tackling, I suppose it's kind of tackling perceptions in literature and how people's perceptions of things are often, like lots of writers write about memory loss, but they don't always talk to somebody with memory loss. I always love it when I read people's work with somebody who has like memory loss, but then they hide a novel, like they hide a notebook under their bed, and then they miraculously remember to get the notebook out. And I'm like, that's so not real. If you have memory loss, that notebook would be stuffed under your bed and you'd find it in 6 weeks' time and be like, who put that there? So I'm quite proud of that. I've got Kaleidoscope, which is a big disability lit journal. They've accepted an essay, which is around my experience of being misdiagnosed, because I was misdiagnosed for 8 years.
Wow.
And then we've just got other things sort of brewing. So I'm sort of busy, and I'm sort of at the moment I'm working on I had a sort of a quirky idea. All my work's always a bit random and a bit quirky, to be honest with you. That sort of came to me a couple of weeks ago, so I've been working on that, and that pitch will probably be ready to go out in a couple of weeks. So just sort of working my way through things. I've got a few speaking engagements. The Bath Flash Fiction, they're online this year. That's on the 24th of this month. I'm speaking at their event. I'm doing a workshop on how to start writing personal essays and the power behind a personal essay. So I've got a few things in the calendar. But
a few. Anything, especially I would love to share that link for your workshop around how to write a personal essay, because we do get a lot of questions around what does it even mean? What's the difference in a personal essay and a memoir and a biography, autobiography? So we'd just love to share that.
And I'm actually I do I'll send on it a load of resources to you. I do regular we have regular editors drop into my sessions, and they talk about like, what if you want to pitch a personal essay, what do we mean by a personal essay, and like what's the difference between creative nonfiction and autofiction. And then I've got a session that's in the works at the moment, that we're going to do a day workshop on pitching nonfiction. So that because that's a book proposal, it's a different format. So I've got 10 editors, 3 of them are from the BBC, sort of coming in and talking about when you want to pitch, and also when you pitch now, it doesn't have to just be a book, like a podcast. You can do paid podcast experience. You can, pitch for different opportunities. And I think that can sometimes be if writers are stuck in a bit of a rut, pitch something different, like aim big. And you never know what doors might open. So
absolutely,
I'll follow up with links for you.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Carrie. This has been amazing. Just seeing all the comments and thanks coming in through our chat here in Zoom and through our YouTube broadcast as well. So if you're watching this on replay, have a look in the comments for the links that we will be sharing, how to follow Carrie Jade Williams, author extraordinaire, prolific author extraordinaire, Instagram at Carrie Jade Writes, and we'll be popping more links down in the comments on our recording, both on YouTube and in our author community. Thank you so much, Carrie. Honestly, you have so much coming up. I think I'm about to go set a Google alert, because I don't want to miss the announcement you have in 2 weeks, and the essay coming out in July, and really anything else. Having read your Financial Times award-winning essay, I'm hooked. I'm a huge Carrie Jade Williams fan. So I'm going to set my alert, and I kind of recommend that to everybody else. We'll make sure we get people connected with you. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been wonderful. We will see you again soon back at AutoCrit, and I'm going to go ahead and close our broadcast.